On Friday, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful reported that NXT releases were coming. It's like the British are coming. So that was an ominous message. And then minutes later came the news they delayed this by 2 weeks. Every year. At least the last couple of years. April 15th. Post-WrestleMania cut. They literally waited just an extra 2 weeks. But we knew this was coming. We knew this was inevitable. 10 names in all, for now. Dakota Kai was given her walking papers, as was Malcolm Bivens of Diamond Mine, although Sapp says the company asked him to re-sign in February and he made it clear to them that he did not want to. And the same for Dakota Kai, she was not keen on re-signing with them either. Dexter Lumis is gone. Persia Pirotta, who apparently just bought a new house in the last few weeks. Never a good time to lose your job, but especially not after moving into your new home when you've got a mortgage to pay. And also, in her case, probably when you're here on a work visa and you lose your job. That makes things even more dicey. Just ask the Iconics. Harland is gone, which would explain why he hasn't been on TV with Joe Gacy the past 2 weeks. Draco Anthony, who's made a handful of appearances on NXT. Raylan Devine, who is the sister of Mace, or Dio Madden. She's 6'3". She's 6'3", former basketball player. I would have remembered seeing her on TV, but she never made it that far. The rest of them I've never heard of before. Sanjana George, Mila Milani, and Paige Prinzavali, who was a referee there named Blair Baldwin. This was said to be a John Laurinaitis decision, and the reason given was, say it with me now, budget cuts. Budget cuts, pal, sorry. Nothing personal, just budget cuts. Yes, one NXT official contacted Fightful and expressed frustration that several angles and acts and stories were affected by the cuts with little to no notice or preparation. Outside of Harland. Harland's been missing for 2 weeks. I think they had to know something was up with him. Dakota Kai, let's take this step by step here. Start with Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai was done for when she had those tryout matches at SmackDown last year and was never called up. She worked with Aaliyah last summer, who did get called up, and then they had Dakota work at least one match that I remember with Cora Jade in November. And she wound up right back in NXT. Vince McMahon saw no main roster potential in Dakota Kai. And per Fightful, her deal was set to expire in April of next year. And once the dark matches came and went, and she wasn't called up, she made it clear that she would not be re-signing with them when her deal was up. So they cut her. The magic number here is 33. That's how old Dakota Kai is. 33 years old. That, as much as anything, I believe, is a reason as to why they didn't see any main roster potential in her. Once Triple H was gone, that was the beginning of the end for Dakota Kai. Look what they were doing with her on television before then as compared to after. They didn't seem to know what they were doing with her. She didn't really fit into their new plans for the brand. She started acting crazy and she was talking to herself. That's what working in WWE sometimes will do to you. It'll drive you nuts. You'll start talking to yourself. She fell out of place. She felt out of place with the relaunch and that whole silly gimmick. Now, they did make her and Raquel the tag team champions at Stand and Deliver, even though it was only for a few days. But they won the titles, and then she had that TV match a few weeks ago to put over Mandy Rose. That was her exit. So, her name being on the list really wasn't shocking at all. And if you listen to the interview that Ember Moon did with Chris Van Vliet, which dropped this week, and I'm going to be talking about that in a few minutes, watch that interview and the way that Athena describes some of the changes that were made in NXT after the reboot. You listen to that, nobody should be surprised that they got rid of somebody like Dakota Kai. She posted on social media, "I don't know what's next for me. I chose Evie, the name Evie, at 17 years old. That chapter is shut. Just know this, I'm far from being done." She is going to be a quality addition to any women's roster. wherever she lands. Dakota Kai is going to be just fine. Malcolm Bivens. The bad news is that Malcolm Bivens is dead. The good news is that Stokely Hathaway is very much alive. Like Dakota, his contract was also set to expire next year. And there was a pitch to bring him up to the main roster as the manager for Omos on Monday Night Raw. And he passed on the idea. LA Knight was said to also be considered for the role. Ultimately, they decided to go a different way with him. He's with Mace now and Mansoor and the dark matches and doing the whole modeling agency gimmick. We'll see if they bring that to TV soon. So they took him in a different direction. And they turned to MVP instead. And they put MVP with Omos. Malcolm Bivens would have done his damnedest to get the big guy over. But even Bivens is not a miracle worker. Malcolm Bivens is great, but he's no miracle man. There's only so much that can be done when it comes to Omos. If he saw that as a dead end for his own career, then good on him for standing his ground if that's how he felt. You know, it's rare that you hear that they did want to bring somebody up to Raw or SmackDown and they had an idea for them and that person told them no. I'm not interested. Sorry. I think I'll pass. But it's clear that he wanted out of there and he got his wish. Albeit a year earlier than he probably was expecting. You know, Hathaway is very talented with a microphone in his hand. He's got a sharp tongue. Very much a throwback to some of the old school wrestling managers, even down to getting in the ring the way Bobby Heenan used to do when his wrestling days were long since over. And WWE would put him in those weasel suit matches with the Ultimate Warrior where he would just get his ass kicked and take bumps. You know, he's done that on indie shows before. Like Dakota Kai, not only is he going to be fine, now he'll have a chance to shine even brighter, not being relegated to the C show. He's also got a history with a very interesting individual, that person being MJF. Hathaway once led a stable that MJF was part of in Beyond Wrestling. Not that MJF needs somebody to talk for him, but to see the two of them reunited in some form would make for some great television. Dexter Lumis was a surprise to me, but it probably shouldn't have been. He's 38 years old, which worked against him more than any other single factor. The storyline leading up to the wedding with him and Indy Hartwell, I thought was, for the most part, it was entertaining. Once they got married, they really needed to either move him up to the main roster or move him into something more meaningful. And instead, it just felt like they didn't know what to do with him and they were kind of treading water. You know, it's like the dog that catches the car. It got the car and now it doesn't know what to do with itself. Even when he spoke his first words at the wedding, it would have made sense naturally to progress his character to where he would actually be talking more on television. And instead, he went right back to being the nonverbal mute. You know, in the ring, he was capable. And I think he at least deserved a look at for a spot on Raw or SmackDown. He never even had the chance. I'm curious to see now if he sticks with a similar character in his next company or on the indies, wherever he goes to next, because he's basically been playing a version of the same serial killer, stalker type persona since his Sam Shaw days in TNA. He's been doing it for almost a decade now, across 2 different companies. God, Sam Shaw and the gut check days. Holy shit, that's taking me back to the Impact Review days of the podcast. Parker Boudreaux was released, better known as Harland, Baby Brock, as a lot of people called him when he was first signed because he bore a striking resemblance to a young Brock Lesnar. Even Paul Heyman once endorsed him in a tweet, told people to bookmark the tweet for historical significance. Historical reference. Come back to this tweet years from now. He might still end up looking like a genius because Harland's only 24 years old. And if he wants to keep doing this, he could still end up being a star one day. Today is not that day. They signed him, they changed his name, they had him shave his head, so he no longer looked anything like Brock Lesnar. And then they fired him. So it was a hell of a run. Now, he could always work indies and get more seasoning. Maybe that's what they encouraged him to do. I don't know. But it's funny because they don't seem to want anybody from the indies anymore, right? At the very least, they're severely toning down the number of indie wrestlers they want to bring in. Nick Khan flat out said that. So if he goes out and he ends up working indies all over the country, or if he branches out and works indies and other promotions all over the world and learns all kinds of different styles, which frankly I think is something that makes a lot of sense for everybody to be doing, that would seem to fly in the face of their new edict. It's one of the reasons why that new edict is not going to last. Like so many other Vince McMahon decrees over the years, they come and go depending on what side of the bed he wakes up on. Remember years ago, it was like, we're not looking for anybody under 6'2", 240 pounds. How long did that last? How long did that? Not very long. Once they realize over time, and they will, that the level of ring-ready talent has fallen off considerably, they'll be right back to the indies. They'll be right back plucking people out of the indies. You watch. It's only a matter of time. Harland wasn't very good, but he was training for what, a year? I think maybe a year, a little over a year. He was still new at this, which is the entire point of their developmental system, to develop these people. Evidently, they didn't think he was developing fast enough. Remember the Athletic interview I referenced last week with Triple H and those quotes about the 2.0 relaunch? A lot of the double talk that we heard in there. He said something else in that interview that was, I think, very telling, maybe about Harland and some of the other names. He said because they're bringing in now so many younger names, it forces them to make quicker decisions on how well a talent is progressing. He said now it just takes them 6 months to know whether or not somebody has an aptitude for this. They announced Harland's signing over a year ago. Now it's 6 months and you're gone if they feel you're not up to snuff. Maybe they didn't think he was up to snuff. They had seen enough. But they didn't even make any attempt to explain his absence from television or to write him off the show. It's just, poof, he's gone. Persia Pirotta, also gone. Wasn't doing much actual wrestling on TV, but she was involved with the silly romance storyline with Duke Hudson, Dexter Lumis, and Indy Hartwell. Now 2 of the 4 are gone. Indy is without her husband, and Hudson's without his girlfriend. I guess that means Indy and Duke now have to become a couple now. Those are the rules. That's how it works. You know, Draco Anthony, he had some size to him, but I didn't see enough of him to say that, you know, there was anything about him that really stood out to me. The other names on the list, a lot of them had not even appeared on television yet. So I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on the other ones. As you have heard me say before, why invest your time in a show where they end up disregarding so much of what happens on that show? This is one of the problems, the big problems now with NXT. Even when NXT was actually developmental the first time, because they started out that way. They started out as developmental. Over time, Triple H raided the indies, he raided Ring of Honor, and he brought in all these guys, a lot of smaller guys, but he brought a lot of guys in with experience, 10, 15 years of experience, and created his own super indie. And that's, the takeovers blew up and it became, you know, really the best, most entertaining brand, and certainly also from an in-ring standpoint, the best television that WWE was producing at its peak. You know, the peak of the black and gold era was just fantastic. But a lot of that was built around the more experienced talent. I think there was a middle ground there where you could keep some of that more experienced talent and start doing a better job of mixing in the ones that don't have any experience so they can work with people who do. I didn't think you had to blow the whole fucking thing up. But even if you go back to when NXT was developmental the first time and was airing on the network every week and not USA, I don't remember there being this level of turnover and all of the constant ridiculous name changes after they've already been introduced on television. It's one thing to sign somebody and before they even make it to TV and they start running vignettes, you give them a new name, right? They've been doing that for years. But I can't remember there being a period where so many people who were already established on television, even if it was only NXT, all the name changes, and like I said, between that and the turnover and the people being cut, this is new. This is new ground that we're on here. I mean, just imagine for a moment that you were in a coma, okay? God forbid you were cleaning out your kitchen cabinet and a blender fell out right on top of your head and knocked you unconscious. You wake up in the hospital a month later. You turn on NXT and you see Diamond Mine, but no Malcolm Bivens. You see Joe Gacy, but no Harland. Where's the big guy that was with Joe Gacy? What happened to him? Now he's got druids, like he's the new Undertaker. You see Legado del Fantasma, and you could have sworn that guy was called Raul Mendoza the last time you watched the show. And you're wondering to yourself, why are they calling him Cruz del Toro? Why is Casey Catanzaro running around calling herself Katana Chance? Why is Kaylee Ray walking around with a flaming baseball bat calling herself Alba Fire? How long have I been unconscious for? What alternate timeline did I wake up in? This is NXT now.